So I wanted to show you an administrative deployment using Snapshot from Metazoa. As you can see over here at right in the Create Job list, I have an Apex class and an Apex page that I want to deploy. I also need a permission set. Let's find that in the source org. And here's my permission set, and I can take a look at that and make sure that it's just what I wanted. Now let's go forward, nothing to delete, and let's go to the deployment interface. Let's do a validating deployment. And as you can see, we have an error. It says on the permission set, there's no field named case.isSelfClosed found on the destination. So now that's a standard field. I can't move it to the destination. I can't create it there. Maybe I could change some settings and get it to appear. But a different thing you can do is just to right-click this and remove the reference to that standard field. And what that does is it removes this from the deployment. And so now you can look at the Remove References interface and see the managed list of everything that's being removed right there. Okay, let's do that and do another validating deployment. So the bad reference error has been resolved, but there's a new error, and it says this object does not exist on the destination. Now, in typical fashion, the Metadata API doesn't tell you what type of object doesn't exist. So what you can do is right-click that and say search for asset type. And what we'll see is it might be a custom object, a custom tab. I think it's a custom object. So let's add that to the Create Job list and do another validating deployment. So we have another error, and what it says is bill_comp_page does not exist or is not a valid override for the action edit. What does that mean? Well, what you could do is you could select this and search immediately the Stack Exchange, and it will give you a lot of information about that particular error. Another thing you might want to do is go back to your Create Asset list and right-click and say, show me the related items to this deployment. And so what that does is it takes all your Create assets here in the center column and shows you to the right everything that they reference. So we can see there's a Flexi page, there's a Lightning bundle. Both of those things will need to be included in this deployment. You can also go off into the future and say, what do they reference? And what do they reference? And you can see the complete deployment boundary of your current deployment and investigate all of that and add the assets right from this interface. Another way to add the assets is just from the deploy interface. So we can just select this unknown asset and say search for the asset type. It's a Lightning bundle, which is what we saw in our deployment boundary. So let's add that to the Create Job list. And let's do another validating deployment. And we get another error, and sure enough, the Flexi page is missing, and we're also going to need to include that. Let's do that right from here. Here it is. And now let's make another validating deployment. And there we go. We now have a good deployment. And so, for example, we can now go from a validating deployment to a transactional deployment and actually make those changes on the destination org. What's important about this is I did 5 or 10 deployments in just a minute or two. I was able to see everything that was related to the deployment boundary and include those items very, very quickly. In cases where I had standard fields or standard permissions that could never be migrated, we were able to seamlessly remove those references from the deployment. So this is really the type of technology you need for quickly re-architecting an org, for removing technical debt, for doing release management, really for doing all the types of things that administrators need to do to manage the 220 different metadata types in your org.